So I can't quite believe this fact, but on Wednesday it is 20 years since King Charles married Camilla.
Yeah, I must admit, I suddenly thought, 20 years, where's that time gone?
Yeah, because honestly feels like yesterday.
Yeah, and they got married on, the Grand National was run on the day that they got married. And the Queen made a speech that, which actually referred to the Grand National, you know, how many hurdles they'd gone over. Because let's be honest, when it sort of got back together again after the divorce from Diana and all that, and there was a great anti-feeling towards the Queen, and that she was certainly the wicked stepmother, you name it. She was not someone who the public took to. But over a very clever strategy, they've kept her now, brought her into the fold. It's been a sort of drip feed. And actually, when you look over the last 18 months or so, she has been the sort of rock that's at times kept the royal show on the road, bearing in mind that the King is recovering from cancer and the Princess of Wales, likewise, recovering from cancer. So they were down on numbers. So she's had to do some of the many more probably engagements than she would. Remember, she's also 77. So most people then might be thinking it's time to take it easier, but no one would fault her sort of commitment. And importantly, she will be going to Italy. The state visit, I believe, is still going to go ahead for the King this week to Italy. Not going to see the Pope, but it will be, I think, a 2-day trip to Italy. And she will be by his side. And obviously, later on the week, they will be celebrating, as you say, their 20th wedding anniversary.
I mean, it is extraordinary, actually, and very clever, sort of the way that the palace has played this, of course, because you're right, there was this kind of resentment towards Camilla, and then latterly, she became the Queen Consort, didn't she? Isn't it amazing how that last word got dropped?
Well, yeah, let's put it this way. It's probably easier. You know, the Queen Consort, you know, just to say...
No, but it was clever. It was really clever, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it then became, people went, oh, she's just the Queen, right? Yeah. And then it became, so it made perfect sense. But it was a good move by the late Queen to say that, you know, that she should be referred to as the Queen's Consort, which then elevates her status. But obviously now... everyone just refers to her as Queen Camilla.
Let's now talk about this, the latest with Prince Andrew. This is amazing. Prince Andrew's involvement with an alleged Chinese spy came at a time his chief aide and other royals believed his reputation was irrecoverable. This is weird. I spoke about it yesterday, about Dominic Hampshire. This is his ex-advisor, who, and he's been revealed in these documents, hasn't he, about Yang Tembo. Just tell us where we are and what we have learnt subsequently.
Well, it appears that Dominic Hampshire and Prince Andrew all had a meeting with the King and to try and understand what was going on in Yang Tembo as well. So it was all a bit messy. But it appears we also seem to be entering into the realms of, you know, getting into Windsor Castle, having secret meetings, and basically Prince Andrew's finances are always being assessed and worked out, how he's dealing through his Picture Palace projects and various other things that he's been involved with. And of course he's living in Royal Lodge, which he has an expensive commitment to maintain. So with the fact that he is sidelined, I think he was pictured riding a horse yesterday in Windsor Great Park, but there are talk that he's still carrying on with his business investments. So they're looking into what's going on. But obviously the King being sort of dragged into it a little bit sort of muddies the water. But wonder what was the reason why the King wanted. Was it because he just wanted to understand what was going on here and made sure that there were no problems? You know, we don't really know. So it's murky. As much of Prince Andrew's business dealings feels at times that sometimes he sailed a bit close to the water, and obviously most notably being linked with Jeffrey Epstein and all the problems that has come from his association. He does seem to have... you know, over the years, problems with who he's associated as he's trying to make a bit of a fast buck here or there. So it's been a problem for him, and this is another one that has to be resolved somehow. But his rehabilitation, I don't see it happening at any time soon in the eyes of the British public. And this sort of how remember, he's 65, so relatively young and still, but is he just twiddling his thumbs in the Royal Lodge, playing a bit of golf, riding a horse? What is he doing, playing video games? Or is he still doing some business in the Middle East and places? By all accounts, he's made a trip to Switzerland, I think. You know, so there are definitely things going on in his life, but what they are, we're not sure.
I mean, the whole thing just seems incredibly unedifying, actually, and I mentioned this yesterday, but surely, and I will give the king the benefit of the doubt, if you've got a, let's say, errant brother, or a brother where you're a little concerned about some of the activities that he may be getting involved in, then surely as a brother, there's nothing wrong with meeting with your brother and saying, what exactly are you doing? Is this a good idea? And having some advice.
Yeah, I think that I'm beginning to, well, I feel that that's probably what's going on. But don't forget, the king over times has, you know, sort of people who work from going around with bags of cash, you know, so it's not always been straightforward for some of the king's people he's had around him, although not necessarily the king involved. But, you know, the royal family can occasionally, people want to be seen with the royal family. So occasionally, the people who may be sailing, you know, with their financial dealings a bit close to the wind, you know, degree of respectability by association with the royal family. So it's not an easy, you know, it's a balancing act. And obviously now it will always be scrutinized. And I think even now, because, you know, it is straitened times at the moment. People are finding it an economically tough time. If the royal family look to be sort of carrying on in a cavalier fashion, that won't go down well with the British public. So the royal family have to be very mindful how they go about their day-to-day business, and particularly, you know, there's talk, you know, we never heard about Prince Philip's will. I think that's locked up for 90 years. We probably won't ever know what was in the Queen's will as well. So all the we never quite know enough. But I'm not saying we should have it, but the royal family have to make sure that they're going about their business in as squeaky clean fashion as is possible.
Right. You know how much I love Harry and Meghan. You know that, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, so there's a big article in the Daily Mail. Prince Harry should be nervous his unpleasant message to Sentebale boss will leak to the public because he's been so outspoken about his wife being bullied in the past. Apparently, well, there's all sorts of gossip involved in this. Apparently, Harry allegedly sent her an unpleasant and imperious message that reinforced ideas that he's used to people being subservient to him when Sentebale's chair refused to publicly back his wife in a row over the polo event last year. Look, there are two sides to every story, aren't there? It's difficult to get the truth here. What's your reading of what is going on? I mean, the whole thing's really acrimonious.
It is. And as you say, he said, she said. There's an element of that. But Dr. Sophie Chandauka has certainly gone onto the front foot. And if there were these messages, and by all accounts, the person who wrote that article is absolutely convinced that this is true, that he did try and say to her, you need to now try and paint Meghan in a positive PR light. And she was basically saying, I'll have none of that, and by all accounts. And that broke down their relationship. So obviously Harry and his fellow trustees aren't happy with this. But what she's also saying, that's Sophie Chandauka saying, Harry, because of what he's done over the last 3 or 4 years, has created a problem for his charity in that they struggle to raise funds. And then there was the trustees are saying, well, why is she spending £400,000 on consultants? But these consultants are trying to work out the best way forward for the charity, given Harry at times is a toxic brand because he's been obviously very disrespectful, you would say, to the royal family. And obviously, Meghan and all the allegations that she and the sort of furor around her. So it's almost he's now got it back on his foot now. That's how is he going to deal with this? And it doesn't look good for Harry if it's true of what is supposed to be said in those texts. But it's ultimately the only losers in this are the people who are supposed to be benefiting from the Sentebale charity, because it's being investigated by the Charity Commission, and at the same time, you know, presumably they're struggling to raise the necessary funds to go about their business.
And of course, Prince Harry and his friend Prince Seeiso has also resigned from this. It's an absolute mess. I mean, they're accusing her of poor governance, as you say. the whole... Well, I think fundamentally also Harry isn't the asset that he once was to that charity.
No, and because he's no longer part of the royal family, as we were mentioning earlier, people like to associate themselves with the royal family because it can be seen in a positive light. And Sentebale definitely had all the right intentions, and you know, and what it was meant to do. But it's obviously gone sour, and sometimes you get the impression playing polo, raising charity, that looks like a sort of very much a sort of imperial sort of, you know, back to the days of the Raj, we're raising money through polo. Is that the optics that the charity should be presenting? And that's one of the things that Sophie Chandauka was saying. We need to bring it back into Africa and actually give it, bring it back to where it's most needed, and look as if, rather than going around and having jolly days playing polo, yes, you might be able to raise money, but is that the right optics for the sport? And as he's no longer part of the royal family, it is harder for him because he's actually got to put in the hard yards. And yes, he was very good at doing all this stuff, and we've seen him actually enjoy and engage with people when he's out there. But at the moment, he's got a lot of problems in terms of dealing, you know, with where he is going. What direction does he go now? With his wife, okay, you may disagree with what she's doing to jam jars and elevating them to new levels of sophistication and honey and all that. But she's at least, you know, in her words, she's trying to become a billionaire and make as much money as possible. But what's Harry doing? At the moment, he looks a rather rudderless man who's now lost the charity to Sentebale. Invictus Games, well, that is still something that he's involved in. But even with that earlier this year, Meghan turns up and steals the show a bit rather than the focus on the servicemen and women who were taking part there. So it's not an easy path for him at the moment because he's not sure where he can go, because does he get into business? Well, he does a few things, but you know, I'm not sure how well they're going either.
Right, okay, Rupert. Always good to talk to you. Thanks ever so much, Rupert. Rupert Bell, our royal correspondent.